Two. So last two start getting a little trickier. Now it starts getting into factoring trinomials. So if I take a look at this one here, it says first simplify. So you got to first factor both top and bottom. Now, if you take a look at this, this is actually a simple trinomial because you have a 1 in front of the x squared. However, there's a little bit of a trick here because you also have y squareds in here. You also have y's mixed up in there. So if you remember from your homework, that being a simple trinomial using product sum integer, the product of this thing is -10. The sum of this thing is 3. Two numbers that multiply to -10 add to 3 are -2 and 5, right? Multiply to that and add to that. So these are the two integers, so I can go straight to the answer. Now normally you would write x on both of these, and then normally you write -2 and the +5 on both of those. However, you have to take into consideration the y squared, because -2 times 5 is not -10y squared, it's just -10. Of course, if you have a y here and here, now when you do the -2y times +5y, it will give you the -10y squared. Also, the middle term being xy's, think about it, x times 5y, it will be 5xy, x times -2y, it will be -2xy, and you can add those things together, and then x times x gives me the x squared. So that's the key there. Still a simple trinomial. The second thing is a simple trinomial also, again using product sum integer of that trinomial there. If I take a look at this, the product of this 15, the sum is 8. So two numbers that multiply to that and add to that, the two numbers are 3 and 5. 3 times 5 is that, 3 plus 5 is that. So those are two integers. So the first bracket will have x plus 3y, remember, because the y squared. And the second one will have x plus 5y, remember, because of the y squared. Okay? So that is the first step, is factor everything fully. We factored both of those fully. We're good. The second step, please never forget it, state restrictions. When you state the restrictions, remember, not the tops, but every bottom factor cannot equal 0. So that x plus 3y, that cannot equal 0. And so what does that mean? It means x cannot equal, bring that over, -3y. So x can equal -3y, whatever that means. But we always solve, because how about if you had a's and b's? You always solve for x because x cannot equal that because x comes before y in the alphabet. So if you had a's and b's, you'd write a does not equal, you know, whatever, -3b or whatever it is. If you had c's and d's, you would say c does not equal whatever it is. Take a look at this one here. This factor cannot equal 0, so x plus 5y, that cannot equal 0. That just means x cannot equal -5y. So that's the second restriction. Then I can cancel out things because these are all factors being multiplied by each other. So that divided by itself is gone. So on the top, I'm just left with x minus 2y, and on the bottom, I'm just left with x plus 3y. Now, of course, I don't have to write these brackets anymore. I can just have that as my final answer. Now, I understand that some of you may take a look at this now, and you may say to yourself, hey, sir, can I not cancel out that x with that x now? And the answer is no. And why is that? The answer is no, because remember what the rules are. The rules are you cannot cancel things out unless they are factors, meaning they're all products, they're all multiplications. This is not a multiplication. This is a subtraction. This is like at the beginning when I said 5 plus 6 all over 4 plus 6. You can't cancel out the 6's because you have to add first. So you can't do that. You can only cancel it out if it is multiplication only. This is not. So you leave this as the final answer, and that's it. And then, of course, the last example, you're going to have all types of factoring here, so you have to be a master of factoring, because if you're not, you're going to have a tough time with this whole unit. You have to be able to factor. That's for this For the next section, 2.6, 2.7, you have to factor through all of these sections. So you have to be a master at factoring. That's what the whole unit is about, factoring, stating restrictions, and canceling things out. And it's not just going to be canceling things out. Tomorrow we're going to do some fraction times another fraction, or divided by another fraction. The day after will be addition, where you have to come up with a common denominator. So it gets pretty crazy. So if you take a look at this one here, factor both top and bottom. Again, I have to factor both top and bottom. The top is a complex trinomial. Now, what I'm going to write is this on both top and bottom. I'm going to take this off to the side and I'm going to factor it, because that is not factoring using PSI. This is factoring using complex trinomials. This is a complex trinomial, so I have to break it or factor it by breaking down the middle term using decomposition. Now this is where this starts taking time, these questions. This is why it's a good idea to learn the crisscross method, because you'd be able to go right to the answer. So if you can learn the crisscross method, that's better for you. The product of AC is 2 times negative 15, which is negative 30. The sum of that thing is negative 1. So two integers that multiply to that, add to that, is negative 6 and 5. So I'm going to break this up into negative 6y and positive 5y. So continuing this, factor by grouping the first two and second two. The first two I can factor out of 2y. This divided by 2y is y. This divided by 2y is negative 3. And then I can factor out a positive 5 from both of these things. This divided by 5 is y, and this divided by 5 is negative 3. How do I know I'm doing it right? Because the two brackets are the same. Now between those two things, I can factor out the bracket, which is y minus 3. And if I factor out from there, I'm left with 2y. And if I factor out from there, I'm left with plus 5. This is the factored form. So I'm going to write that here. Y minus 3 and 2y plus 5. Now if you knew the crisscross method, or the X method, to doing complex trinomials, this would be a joke. You'd get this right away. But you got to get good at that as well. So watch my video on the crisscross method, so that, or even look up some videos on YouTube, and you can come up with how to use the crisscross method. So last one, also I have to factor out that. That's also a complex trinomial, so I have to also factor this. So factoring this thing now, so this takes a lot of time, of course. The product of AC, in this case, is 4 times 3, which is 12. The sum of this thing is negative 13. So you can see how fast I'm going now. I'm not going over how to factor complex trinomials. This is a review. Like, you should know how to do complex trinomials. So at this point, if you're not at complex trinomials, you have to get at to that level. So two numbers that multiply to that, add to that. The two numbers are negative 1 and negative 12. Maybe hard for some people to see, but that times that is that. That times that is that. So those are the two numbers. So I have to use decomposition by leaving the first term and the last term alone and breaking up the middle term into negative 1y and negative 12y. You don't have to write the 1, of course, but then factor by grouping. Grouping the first two terms, I can factor out a y. If I divide that by y is just 4y, that divided by y is just negative 1. And then between these two terms, I can factor out, remember there's a negative out front, so a negative 3. That divided by negative 3 is positive 4y. That divided by negative 3 is negative 1. How do I know I'm doing it right? The two brackets are the same. So now I can factor out from the two things the bracket, 4y minus 1. Divide it out from there, I'm just left with y. Divide it out from there, I'm just left with negative 3. So again, you got to be that quick in order to factor these things. Otherwise, learn the crisscross method. So I have 4y minus 1, and then I have y minus 3. And we've only begun the problem. The problem is to factor first. That's just step 1 of the problem. So you have to be good at this, or else you'll find yourself that you're going to take 15 minutes just doing one question on the test. The test's only an hour, and I'm sure the test has more than 4 questions on it. So you don't want to be taking 15 minutes on a problem like this and figuring out how to use decomposition for the first time on the test. So learn decomposition well, and also learn the crisscross method so you don't have to even use decomposition. Then, second step, state restrictions. Remember, the tops are okay, just the bottoms cannot equal 0. So the first bracket, 4y minus 1, that bracket cannot equal 0 because that'll make the whole bottom 0. Denominator cannot be 0, it's undefined. can't divide by 0. So that means 4y cannot equal, bring that over 1. And if I divide both sides by 4, I get y cannot equal a quarter, or 0.25. And then the second bracket, y minus 3, that cannot equal 0. So that just means y cannot equal, bring that over, positive 3. That's my second restriction. So I have two restrictions. How do you get your marks? You have to have the restrictions proper. If you have too many restrictions, that's wrong. You cannot start stating that as a restriction because the numerator is okay to be 0, just the denominators. And then step 3 is cancel out the like terms. So this is all multiplication on top and bottom. This bracket divided by the same bracket is just 0. So on the top, without the brackets, now I'm just going to write 2y plus 5. And on the bottom, 4y minus 1. Of course, if you like the brackets, do that. You can't cancel anything else out because it's not multiplication or division anymore, just addition and subtraction. So, the key is get good at factoring. You got to be an expert at factoring. Also, another key is for complex trinomials, simple trinomials are easy. Complex trinomials, I would recommend looking at the crisscross method. There's a lot of good videos on crisscross method, and I'm going to be putting up a video as well, so you can take a look at mine.